Hi, and welcome to the voice of Bold Business Radio. And I am glad to be your host today. Okay, Tonya Dalhaus is here with me today. Not only are we going to laugh a lot, and hopefully you will actually hear the sentences and the content that will be shared and the wisdom that she brings. This is just going to be fun and it's going to be insightful because we think about relationships and those come with some sort of baggage and stigma that we're working with, that we're working from, and it's based on our own experiences. So what happens if you take all that personal stuff that we have, those experiences, the good and the bad, and we throw them in the workplace with the good and the bad experiences of everybody we're working with, remotely or in the same physical location? There are challenges, there are opportunities. And I have to tell you what, not only that, they're just things like pet peeves, things that people don't talk about, like intimacy. And what does that look like in a business relationship? And can we be friends at work? Well, Tonya is going to tell us that and a whole lot more right after this. Before, though, we go to the introduction, I want to make sure and introduce you to her. Tonya Dalhaus is an experienced speaker, networker, and relationship communications expert. She uses her intuitive skills to help singles find love online and offline through her business, The Dating Agent. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Again, here we are. This is In Relationship. Thanks for listening to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Tonya, how are you today?
Hey, I am settled for the moment.
And you know what? That's what it's about. The moment, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, when you and I first started talking about the show, there were two reasons I wanted you to come back today. One, tomorrow is Valentine's Day. And two, we don't talk about friendships and personal relationships that come into play when we're talking about business and business relationships. We kind of do, but we don't actually talk about how they're the same or how they're different and all of the elements and nuances that we have to face in a setting where we're exchanging skill for money, where we are leading a team and we have expectations, and this thing called friendship and relationship crops up and causes a ruckus all the time. Can you just jump in from there at the moment?
I think it's interesting because their relationships in business are so important, especially with your colleagues at work. And not enough emphasis is put on that in the workplace. They're finally starting to come up with different positions called cultural engagement directors to try and help people work through some of those difficult relationships in the workplace. But I believe, as they say, you spend about 80% of your life at work, which is more than you spend with your spouse, right? So you would think that you would put the same amount of investment into developing the relationships with your work colleagues as you would at home. But people don't, and that's what leads to issues in the workplace, negativity, poor employee morale. So it's very important to invest the time and take the time to kind of foster relationships at work, I think, from management on down. And that doesn't happen, particularly in the US.
80% of our time is spent at work. And that's, of course, not our sleeping hours. That's our waking hours.
Right.
We're thinking about that. You're right. We have people that we dread to see because we don't want to ride the elevator with them. We have the people we can't wait to see who sometimes before we're coming, they do that eye roll thing. And then they put on their smiley face. And then there are the people that are genuinely excited. And I say excited because that's relative, genuinely in a great place and want to interact with us when we show up. And notice I'm talking about how other people are reacting to us instead of us reacting to other people right now. Because isn't one of the first steps to know how people perceive us so we can either change or foster what we're doing to be seen the way we are, the way we want to be seen?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what you put out, you get back. That's always been sort of my philosophy. Obviously, I've always gone into my work environments with a lot of humor. And I'll just go from personal experience here. One of the most challenging roles I think I had was when I was running an emergency shelter program in Boston for homeless families. And I had 14 case managers, all from incredibly diverse backgrounds. In that kind of environment, there's a lot of emotional stress. It's a very physical job. People are putting themselves into fairly risky situations, and they need a lot of emotional support from their colleagues. One thing as a manager in that position I found very isolating was I felt I needed to create boundaries between me and my staff members. And that was really difficult because they would all go out and support each other. And I was kind of on this island by myself. And I don't know what the answer is to breaking down those boundaries between management and staff to foster, positive relationships and feel like as a manager you can have friends with your employees without crossing any boundaries. But how do you do that without feeling like you have to sabotage their relationships to the company? For example, if I know that there's going to be layoffs coming, do you tell your friend or do you not tell your employee?
And that's what makes it so tough, doesn't it? That is the line that, man, I know each one of us has to decide for ourselves. How did it feel when you were in that situation?
It was complex.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I looked for management relationships elsewhere, to try and get that support. But it's hard to keep those walls up when you're working with people in such an intimate setting and such an emotionally charged setting.
I think it's great that you decided to seek relationships outside so you had peers that you could talk to, probably on two levels then. One, just, wow, I need this emotional support. And two, being able to discuss as a manager where that boundary is and knowing and seeing that it's so fuzzy because sometimes the boundaries move based off of situations. This concept of leadership has taken on a look of friendship instead of actually a leader. Can you think of, or do you have offhand some common causes why that miscommunication occurs?
It was these two girls, and they're sitting in a cafeteria together, and they both work at the same place. And one of them says to the other one, I'm going to put my friendship hat on and talk to you about something. And the other girl goes, okay. And she's like, that new guy that they just hired is really cute. I noticed that you're interested in him. And the other girl goes, yeah, I know, he's really hot. I want to go out on a date with him. She's like, okay, can I put my boss hat on now? And she's like, you need to not date him.
Right.
And I'm like, that's so typical. And when you're in that management position and you have relationships with staff that are outside of work, what if you have to fire that person? Like, how do you go about that? How do you go about doing discipline with somebody that's a friend that you were out drinking with a couple nights before? It can be very complex. I guess my management style has always been to try and keep up employee morale and try and create opportunities for my staff to have relationships outside work, but not directly involve myself in those relationships.
Yes. And I think that boundary is really necessary because of the things you were saying around, man, what if the worst happens? What if disciplinary action happens? Because they're going to feel hurt and ashamed and frustrated because you didn't come to them as their friend. The situation deemed that the boss hat be worn or the manager hat be worn. I'm glad we are saved by the bell. Thank you, Mandy. We have a question/comment. Let's say that we're talking about valuable relationships, even friendships, for the overall company culture. Is it bad? And do we want friends in the environment? Or this concept of company culture and the influence it has over our roles, does it even allow for friendships to happen?
I do think that companies make it hard for you to develop friendships, although I feel like in recent years, they're moving more toward understanding that that is a necessary part of having good employee morale and people that stay longer. But I totally think that you have to have friendships within your peers. I don't think it's wrong to date somebody that you're working with. I mean, that's what keeps you involved in the company. And a lot of times, work is so stressful as it is, you need those supports to get you through. I mean, some of the friends that I worked with in horrendous work environments are the only reason I was able to stick it out for far longer than I probably should have, because of that support and that friendship. nobody can exist in an island by themselves. You have to have peer support and a community. Companies need to work more toward fostering communities that are supportive of each other rather than not allowing for that to happen.
Can't we be part of a community? And can't we have a support system without actually being friends?
Well, what would your definition of friendship be?
That, I think, is the question that we're kind of dialing down into. And in a business setting, I don't know. In a personal setting, I know. I have my Facebook friends, right? I have the people who are I can count on to comment and stay in touch and instant message with me and to have virtual teas here and there. I can count on them and get to know them and really be supportive of them, and they're supportive of me and what's going on. Then I have friends, and by the way, everybody, I'm going to totally out us. I have friends like Tonya where we go out for dinner. We have cocktails together. Our families have dinner together. And I know I could call you when you're in town. I can call you and be like, hey, when can we make this happen? And something will happen. And you can do the same. And that's a different level of friendship. And then you have the friendships that always continue even when there's a lot of years in between. You're really good friends. You have, for whatever reason, time takes you apart. And then when you come back together, it's like you never left. So I think there are levels of friendship. And when we expect our coworkers to be somewhere more than Facebook friends, and maybe even like the friends we would see and go out with and call our BFFs or whatever, so we have this personal network piece, then I think you're talking about a work network piece, which includes a level of familiarity that has an element of friendship in it. You can be open, but you might not tell all of your secrets to.
Like any community, you're always going to have those different levels of friendships that you're talking about. And I think you can have really close personal relationships with people that you work with. And then you're going to have people that you just don't click with as much and are more of acquaintances and just work colleagues. But I don't think it's wrong to seek out people that you can call when you get a flat tire on the way to work that happen to be your work colleagues. I mean, one of my absolutely best friends in the world, she's like more like a sister to me, and I'm the godmother of her son. We got to know each other through this really negative work environment and became really close. And she was the person that, you know, I could go over there on a Saturday night, we could sit down with a bottle of wine and talk about all the stress that we were suffering through with the boss that we had at the time. And she was somebody that I could lean on for that and feel like I could be honest about my emotions around that and know that she wasn't going to turn around and run back to my boss and say, you know, she said all that. But I think you need that person. Or if you bottle all that stuff up, you become as negative as the people that are in your environment.
Who do I feel like I can trust? Isn't that an element of every relationship?
Absolutely. Trust is the most important element of any relationship. Trust and communication.
Yes. One of the things that you said was I could say things that they wouldn't get back to somebody else at the office. Isn't that really important when we're thinking about who we hang around with, who's going to be able to challenge us, and who will promote us?
And I just want to clarify too, when I'm talking about sharing feelings and emotions, there's a productive way of doing that and a non-productive way. So I'm not talking about just bad-mouthing people just for the sake of bad-mouthing people. I'm talking about discussing behaviors that have impacted your ability to be productive in your workplace.
And to be able to proactively find solutions to those, something new to try.
Exactly.
And it can be easier with somebody who can see it from a different perspective in the same place. That's the truth. I'm a big proponent of lifting everybody up. That's one of the things I hear in what you're saying, is that the way that we interact with others, the trust that we build, it will allow us to find somebody we can connect with productively, evaluate and brainstorm different ways to approach situations, yet also at the same time be able to have a glass of wine with, go out for a cocktail, be able to kick back some.
Yeah. And I can speak from the case managers that I had, because that was such a challenging job. I mean, for anybody who's worked in social work, that can be one of the most demanding things on your personal well-being. They're all still very much in contact with each other. They're good friends. Two of them are actually married now, and they've been married for a long time, and they continued to work at the shelter after they were married. And I, as a manager, totally supported those relationships because it helped them get through some of the most horrific things that anybody should have to take on their plate and take home.
Yes.
You didn't have to take that stuff home alone.
Right.
Child abuse and neglect. And that's a lot to carry if you're just an island by yourself and you're totally autonomous from everybody you work with.
Yes. Agreed. Completely agreed. And you either can really work together as a couple or you can't. My husband and I, we're the opposite. We knew by the time we parted ways from working at our first gig / company / whatever you want to call it, success even, that we were never going to work together again. Now, that said, we still help each other solve problems. We still bring at the dinner table when we go out, when we're kicking back, when we're just seeing each other around our work meetings, when we're in the same space. We will talk about those things because we get that each one of us has such a different perspective that we can do some of those things and not be in the same space and still have that support. So I am envious of that couple. Yet at the same point in time, I love what I have. And so we have to find what works, don't we?
So I think this is a good transition into, let's talk about whether or not you should be friends with your business.
Ooh,
you should go into business with a friend or your spouse or significant other.
Yeah.
The pros and cons of being in business with somebody you're already intimately in a relationship with.
Yes. Are you going to start us?
I'm not.
Okay, good.
I'll start off by talking about my own personal experience with it. And I believe that communication is always key. If you are if you are in a good relationship with somebody, and now I'm talking like an intimate partner, and are able to communicate effectively and productively, you could go into business together. But getting a business partnership is more like a marriage than I think a lot of people recognize. So it comes with all the same things that you need in a marriage: trust, communication, the same goals, the same work ethic.
And different work styles.
Different work styles. I mean, people don't always take that in consideration when they're choosing a business partner, though. And actually, they don't take it into consideration enough when they choose a marriage partner either, but they need to.
Cheers to that.
Yeah. And a big one, I mean, my biggest one is, how do you deal with conflict? I mean, that is huge in both a business partnership and a marriage. But how you deal with conflict's always going to be there. It's how you deal with it that helps you to move forward.
So all those business trainings that you can take about learning these soft skills will help at home. And it's a great playground and workspace to try things out and be able to discuss and find new ways. And then out of that can come back. So there's this great ebb and flow, which is what I have found is what I learn, I can take home. We can talk about, we can try out in a different way, of course, because it's a different setting. Yet the outcomes from that can come back to the workspace and how we work at Red Direction and with the Voice of Bold Business and things like, and even clients for that matter. We are the poster children for who you are when you don't want to work together and don't even try, because I've been there and you can learn from our mistakes. We are both creators. We are both independent thinkers. One of us is linear and one of us is not. And we both are willing to put into the big picture. And so we clashed in, what do you prioritize? Not how to prioritize, but what do you prioritize, in what order? And what was needed from one side, product development, and what was needed from the other side, client retention and business growth. and we both had these great ideas. And then here's the thing. We talked and we got along. We talked about it at breakfast. We talked about it when we drove to work. We talked about it at work. We maybe ate lunch with other people because then we at least had a break from each other. We talked about it on the way home. We talked about it at dinner. We talked about it before bed. And it was the company we were running, the company we were growing. And before we knew it, we had no life except for our company, because we were both creative and committed and excited about what we were doing, that we energized each other more into the business. And it burned us both out to a degree. It also made us realize that we ended up fighting more than we got along, because it got tired. We were tired of the constant ideas and the constant opportunity and the constant, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? Because it wore us down. For what it's worth, when you're a lot alike, it doesn't matter if the intentions are good. It doesn't matter if you get along. Can it take over the whole existence of actual what you're living. And we don't want that to happen. Living is more than just the work we do, even when we're passionate about it and we're excited about what we're doing. When it becomes all about that, we don't make friends. I lived 15 years in one house and only knew my neighbors by sight. We never really talked to anybody. All of the people that I knew that I had relationships with were far away, not necessarily bad from a perspective of having people you can talk to and having a good network of people that you trust and could share with. Really bad when you had a flat tire and you needed a ride.
Yes. Were you living in Maine, perchance? I lived in Maine for 15 years and never knew my neighbors either. But that wasn't because I was working all the time.
Well then. Hey, so I have another question. Before we ask the question, I want to circle back. How does where somebody works or what level in an organization somebody is, how do you take that into account as the dating agent when you're helping them try and find somebody to meet?
There's so much more than just if one person's a manager, one person's not, that you have to take into consideration when you're looking for people's long-term relationships. The things that I mostly focus on more so than what level of work that they're in. What is their communication style? How do they address conflict? What they're looking for, big picture. Do they want kids? Do they not want kids? I mean, those are basic common things, but a lot of people, again, they don't think about those.
Mm-hmm.
They just say, well, maybe I'll have kids with the right person, but then they get into the relationship with the right person and they realize, no, I never really wanted kids. Yeah, I just said maybe. Well, maybe is off the table if you're with somebody who really wants 3-4 kids, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If you're a manager or CEO, then you can certainly date somebody who's not. I think education level is more important than people think in relationships, because if you have higher education and have gotten a master's or a PhD, your thought processing is different from somebody who's maybe just graduated with a GED in high school. And not that that can't work ever, because there's always relationships that can work for a multitude of reasons. But I think that people tend to gravitate more to people who are like-minded in their thinking.
So compatibility points.
Yes.
This ties right into Josh's question. He says that he's had some bad friendship experiences at work. He wonders how sincere really are friendships that we make at work, especially in big companies, because he thinks the bigger the system, the more potential manipulation and misuse of relationship is. What's your take on that? First of all, we're sorry, Josh. That sucks. It's hard.
Suck. And probably what I would say is be more selective in who you're calling your friends.
Love it. Okay, so we're going to circle back.
You know what? I have been in the situation with people that I haven't been in work situations with, that have been friends that have turned out to be manipulators and not good friends. I think you find those people in any situation or community. So you just need to know to look for the red flags. I think that one mistake that people tend to do, and I know that I certainly have done in the past, is jumping into friendships, what you call friendships, too quickly. Just because I've gone out and had a couple cups of coffee with you and maybe shared that I have a husband at home doesn't make you my friend. It takes a lot more to develop that trust. And you want to make sure that trust is in place before you really start to feel like a friendship is being born. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not to say that, part of being a good friend is being able to open up and be vulnerable too. But I think you'd want to protect the deeper secrets that until you really know the person and know that they're going to safeguard your trust. And I don't think it changes from the workplace to non-workplace.
You are listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. This is program 125 in relationship, where we're talking with Tonya Dalhaus today. Where we just left off makes me think of checking motives. It sounds like in Josh's scenario, what is his motive for seeking friendship? And what were the motives of the other people who said they were or perceived as his friends? So, and I say motive, kind of sounds bad, doesn't it?
So are we talking about stereotypes now?
Yeah, let's move into that. Mm-hmm.
In business or in personal relationships?
I think we should just mix them all up right now.
All right. Well, here are some of my favorites. BMW drivers are arrogant jerks. Sorry to all you BMW drivers out there. People who are obese are lazy workers. And an interesting thing about that I saw recently on this marketing job description site was that they only wanted somebody who was an obsessive gym rat that worked out 7 days a week and was training for marathons, because those types of people are the ones that they find are motivated and driven, which are true. I suppose you have to be pretty motivated and driven, but I know I can name a lot of people who aren't training for marathons who are equally motivated and driven. And I felt like that kind of eliminated a lot of, I don't know if they were looking for, that was their way of being ageist without actually being ageist.
Oh, we've got to learn to read between some of these lines.
Right. So that.
Okay, motive, everybody. What's their motive?
A lot of people, with disabilities and people who are ageist and so anyways, so I thought that was an interesting one. Software engineers have no social skills and are introverts. Well, you can speak from experience about that one, Jess, right?
I sure can. As can you. What was the whole thing again? I can tell you piece by piece, at least in my experience.
No social skills and are introverts.
Yeah, I happen to be one of the few who found a developer who has a lot of social skills and has business thinking capabilities and can solve conflict and approach conflict constructively. He is an introvert, but the rest does not apply.
Right. Well, you've met my husband, who's also a software engineer. I think we both know that he is not introverted.
He's not introverted. He also has a lot of language around sensing people's feelings and being able to include
very emotionally intelligent. And he's also he's won speech contests.
Yes, he has.
Which, I mean, most people think software developers can't speak out loud outside their cubicle.
Which is kind of crazy. And our motive here is, are people like us or are they different than us? And when we make that delineation, this is a motive. Are we looking for people to be like us, to be with, or are we looking for the opportunities that somebody who thinks differently from us actually has?
So this is my favorite that you'll love. Blondes are dumber than brunettes.
Oh, the best blonde jokes. Oh my gosh.
So, I know you're smarter than me, but I just want to say that I appreciate you letting me on your show anyway.
I'm not sure if I'm the smarter one here. I put fake blonde in my hair.
Okay, real quick, here's my favorite blonde joke. So
I'm ready.
Two blondes are standing on either side of a river, and one yells to the other one, "Hey, how do you get to the other side?" And the other one yells back, "You are on the other side."
Do you know of any stereotypes about redheads? Eva's asking us.
Well, redheads, they have fiery tempers, right? Yeah, really fiery tempers. And in fact, I've actually had people tell me that they won't date redheads.
Because they're too feisty?
They don't want no gingers, because gingers are too high maintenance and too feisty.
Oh, ooh, more motives. So I want to be lazy.
Sorry, all you Irish people.
Huh. So now when we talk about this, it's not as crazy to talk about motive. We might not understand our motive. It's worth a second look. And there is a motive. What's the reason that's driving us to think this way, accept this, let it go without giving it a second thought?
Well, I think the problem is people focus on stereotypes and not behaviors, and we need to retrain our thinking to only focus on behaviors. Because behaviors are really what stereotypes come out of. It's negative behaviors that people don't like, and instead of just focusing on that behavior and trying to address that behavior using productive communication, they just lump it into, like, I dated this one redhead who had an anger problem and was very emotionally abusive, and so therefore all redheads have anger problems and are emotionally abusive. And we know that's not the case. Those stereotypes that come out of behaviors that are made are not true as a generalization.
How can we check in and see if we need to challenge our own thoughts in this area?
I think the hard part is that people want to they want to make it easy on themselves. So compartmentalizing people into groups makes it easier for people to manage through their emotions. It's much harder to try and confront somebody's behavior and have to go through all those motions. It's easier to say to your husband, because he dropped underwear on the floor, that he's lazy than it is to say, hey, I'd really appreciate it if you don't leave your underwear on the floor every single time he does it.
Theoretically, people are not leaving their underwear on the floor in the office. Theoretically.
Hopefully,
that would be the goal. Yet, maybe they're missing deadlines.
I did work in the ballroom dance industry. People left a lot of clothes on the floor in a lot of places.
That's true. That's true. Truth. Well, and so wouldn't the same thing apply when somebody's missing a deadline, right? We've got this concept of, oh my gosh, they're lazy, they're missing this deadline, or they're not motivated enough to actually do what they say they're going to do. And that creates this thing of, are we going to keep asking them to do the same thing that they're failing at? Or are we just going to stop? And what happens when we stop? We've stopped communication.
I had an amazing crew of case managers working with me at the shelter. And we'd run into things like that all the time. And so as a manager, I would sit them down and address the behavior. And we'd talk about what was going on and get to the problem. I mean, a lot of the times, like things like missing deadlines or procrastinating, either they don't know what to do, they're afraid of making a mistake. Most often in the case with my case managers is they were trying to juggle 25 to 30 cases each of people that lived and were in scatter sites all over Boston. It was a lot to deal with. Mm-hmm. And so having those heart-to-hearts and talking specifically about the behavior, yeah, it takes a lot more time and energy as an individual to do that, but the outcome, the positiveness of doing that outweighs it, because then you have somebody who respects you, who wants to please you, who, when they have a problem, know that they can bring it to you and have a conversation about it, and instead of letting it get to a point that there's no going back from.
What are the most common sources of workplace stereotypes? And how do we recognize that they're happening to us?
People talk a lot about race. They talk a lot about gender. They talk a lot about age. They talk a lot about whichever, millennials. We have the millennials versus the baby boomers. So the millennials are irresponsible and narcissistic, and the baby boomers don't understand modern technologies and aren't on trend. And those, I think, are the generalizations. And I think companies and people are more aware of those. What they don't look at, I think, are those less known stereotypes, such as obesity, income level, education level. So there's a lot of other how people dress, how people come dressed,
Yes, I do know.
There's, yes. It's really how they wear their hair. There's so many other, when you think back to high school, I think that's when all these stereotypes actually get formed. Like, how miserable was high school?
So a lot of us don't want to think that we have bias against us, yet it's easier to see it from the outside than it is almost to figure out how to check in with ourselves, which is why I bring this up. There are a lot of biases out there that we have to be aware of. And the biases are going to be different from different people based off of their experiences. There's not necessarily anything we can do about it from their perspective, because we can't change other people. We can only change ourselves. So when we can do something about it, it's just to be aware of the fact that, okay, so there's something happening toward me that I'm not quite sure about. Maybe somebody is pacifying me. And that's actually something, by the way, it's pretty close to are you lying to me in terms of the meters that I have. If you're just saying something to move on in a conversation, I'm going to know real quick. And I'm going to be like, well, what's going on? What's the reason? Are you not interested in this? Is there something about me and that you don't want to work with me? Is there something I'm not thinking of? Is there just something that you don't want to do? What do you think, Tonya? What if we just ask those questions?
Personalities come into a lot of play. It's just like that magic of when you find somebody that you are really connected to on an intimate level and people that you aren't. And you can take two people that look very similar and have similar backgrounds, and one you're madly attracted to and the other one you're just not. For whatever reason, there's that little piece that's missing. It could be a personality thing. It could be the pheromones are off. There's so much complexity to relationships. And that's something I think that people don't consider, and they try and force relationships that aren't there because they feel like, well, if I don't force a relationship, then I must be stereotyping or being biased. But there's so many other pieces that it could be. And I think that people need to start taking that into consideration. Let's just say that I don't get along with you and you're Asian. It's not because you're Asian. It could be because you have this personality quirk that reminds me of my mother or something. Could be something that just doesn't work for me for whatever reason, but has nothing to do with race or age, or if you're a millennial or you're a baby boomer or any of those other things. It could just be that our personalities just don't click, and that's okay and should be recognized. And I think that people, what can really help this is to learn to communicate around that. And this whole pressure that we've put on ourselves in this country to behave politically correct and be in a certain way, I think has impacted the ability to actually have positive relationships.
It's the culmination of our personal boundaries, of our own desires and passions and the things that we want in this world. The people that we must know to get there, the people we need to know to support us to get there, and still being perceived as being a person that is going to be given opportunities by other people instead of always having to look for the opportunities to go after.
I love when people try to pretend they want to have a relationship with you so that they can try and sell you something or push like multi-level marketing or something like that. And and it's like, they don't put any work into actually having the relationship before they make the ask.
Yes.
That drives me crazy.
Yes. And that's right. This scenario, it was a LinkedIn thing. I talked to somebody and they were like, great, I got this email. I got this setup of this thing, and I got another email that said, fill out this form. And it was like a client intake form. So I responded and I said, I'm not interested in being your client. I thought we were going to get to know about each other's business and find out what we have going on so we can see what kind of overlap we've got here. And the response was, oh no, that's exactly what it is. Get on the phone with them yesterday. Not so much. It was exactly what? Questions from the intake form that I did not fill out, and the sales pitch and the conversation all around the product and the price and what could be done and how not only I could spend money, but I could also make money from this.
And that ties into another one that really drives me crazy. So, and a lot of these come from networking because I'm a big time networker. I believe that amazing relationships can be formed through networking. I have people that I've met networking that still contact me from years and years and years ago.
By the way, that's how we met.
Yes, and that is exactly how we met. So same scenario in the networking event that you and I used to go to. I repeatedly met this same woman over and over again. Within a very short amount of time. So it wasn't like long amounts of time had gone by in between our meetings. And she continuously introduced herself to me as if she'd never met me before. Okay, so that's a huge pet networking. I mean, a huge business pet peeve of mine. You know, if you're going to see somebody over and over, take the time to know who they are. But it gets worse. So then all of a sudden, I get a call from her. And she introduces herself on the phone because she found my business card and her stuff and wants to sell me something on the phone. And I'm like, you have never even remembered my name. You haven't taken any time to develop this relationship with me, to know who I am, to know what my business is. And then now you just want to call me up out of the blue and
the good news
is me buy something and support you.
It wasn't a half attempt that they watched you online and made a couple of comments and made sure that you knew that they were connecting with you.
Right.
And called you for an ask. I think that would be.
No, it was totally out of the blue.
Well, that's pretty bad. I didn't know you could get worse than that. Okay, one more.
Asking somebody for help, but then expecting that they will rearrange their schedule to accommodate you.
Oh, yes.
And I find that as somebody who's done a lot of volunteer work, you volunteer, you take your time, and then it's like, well, this isn't convenient for us, so you need to make your schedule convenient to what we need. And I find that very frustrating. If somebody's willing to help you and give you the time, that they have, then make it as easy for them as possible.
By the way, everything that Tonya is talking about here, it's the behavior side of things. It's accepting things at face value. It's one step that leads to another step that leads to another step. And then before you know it, there's a path where the two people are going together. Maybe they diverge and maybe they don't. However, in the grand scheme of things, it's about how we're showing up. And that's one thing that I've taken away from you today, Tonya. It's how we show up. And maybe we don't need to question ourselves all the time. And by the way, it's probably not a good idea to question others. That's just paranoia. Let's take a look at how can we show up here? What can we do right now? And do everything we can do right now and be all in to each of those things.
Well, one last thing that I'd wanted to mention is stop being a victim. Because if you present yourself as a victim to others, it's never going to go forward. Take accountability for yourself and your own actions and focus on your behaviors. And are your behaviors turning others away? Or is it actually a stereotype or a bias? Because more often than not, I think it's how we present ourselves in the world is how the world perceives us.
There you have it, Tonya Dalhaus, and we're talking about in relationship. You will find all of the program notes for this show at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P125. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 125. Make sure you subscribe to The Voice of Bold Business by email through iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and several other platforms. You can find what's available on thevoiceofboldbusiness.com. I have to tell you, we want to hear from you. Comment in the social media streams where you find this. Send us an email, radio@reddirection.com, because we want your ideas and your feedback and your experiences. It's what you do, it's what I do, it's what Tonya does, and how we share that and learn from each other that defines what it means to be a leader today. Listen in to The Voice of Bold Business where podcasts are sold. And we're going to leave you with this question. How do you show up in relationship?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.